from there, since we're running low on time, I think that'll work out well. And I picture this going just like our last meeting, and we'll just take it from there, and then we'll try to be respectful of your time and get out of here as close to 2-ish as we can. Sound good?
Don't worry about my time.
Well, Carrie will usher you out of here, I'm sure, or keep you too long. From the American Principles Project standpoint, and you may or may not have gotten some information from us ahead of time, because I didn't want to blindside you with a question like this, but we've got one of our main concerns nationwide, something that the next president of the United States is going to have a dramatic impact on is there's a lot of attention on healthcare reform, Obamacare, a lot of attention on everything from student loans to healthcare to taxation issues and budget, and those are all great things. Even a lot of attention on life issues here in the state, and those are things that almost every Republican candidate will go, yes, I'm pro-life, and I want smaller government and fewer taxes, and I want we appreciate that. However, one thing that's not being talked about, and we'd like to hear just your views on this, is, as you probably know, we've seen Race to the Top is the big carrot and stick for states to adopt what the Bill Gates Foundation and the National Governors Association created, which is national core standards in education. And they're expecting that tests, everything from the ACT and the Iowa Test of Basic Skills down to local tests, are going to align with this national core curriculum. And I'm just wondering what your views are on that as it relates to the federal involvement in education. Like I said, a lot of attention on the other federal takeovers of things, but I'm wondering what your views are on ed and states and local governments' roles in ed.
Well, first, hearing on what y'all stood for, I thought I just ought to get up and walk out and say, I agree with you 100%, because I do. But I agree in a different way. You see, I go back to the original basis of why I opposed federal government involvement. Not just because of this. That's enough. That's enough. It's not in the Constitution. In the first place, it's the tool by which governments have historically indoctrinated children in their agenda and their dialogue. I oppose with everything I got the NEA. Reagan promised to do away with it. He didn't. I don't know how difficult it'd be to do away with it, but I bet you I could make it extremely difficult to continue. And I think that it is the right thing to do for a number of reasons. One, and you have to understand this, if a candidate does not have the understanding here, when he's confronted there, he'll cave. That's the first thing. And it can't be just because it's not in the Constitution, which is not. It has to be an understanding that God governs this world through jurisdictional sovereignty. He has placed through the parent certain aspects, one of which is education. When I was running in state government, I said, first, if you want to send your children to public schools, that's okay. If you want to send them to Christian schools, that's okay. If you want to send them homeschooling, that's okay. But it's your choice. Personally, I object to the way the public schools are doing things. I have a child in public school. I've had a child in Christian school. I have had a child in Christian school. I have had a child in private school. I believe my children have stood up to their teachers, whether in public, private, Christian, or whatever. In Christian school, my son, bless his heart, stood up and walked out of the classroom with a teacher teaching evolution. And he's not what you would say wanted to go after higher education or anything. That was when he was in school. He's an iron worker now. He stood up and walked out, went to the principal's office. I didn't tell him to do that. My other son, 6'3", 240 now in 11th grade, stood up to his science teacher when he started talking about evolution. I believe in education being the right of the parent because it was given to them by God, not by government. It's separation of church and family. It's a separation of state and family. Nobody has the right to take that right from the parent. And I'm a parent. Some of the best, smartest have been homeschooled that I've seen. But I realize parents can make mistakes in that and they need help too. But the brightest people we ever had in this country were homeschooled. Religious liberty, you mentioned. I'm jumping. let me go back and just say, I understand about Gates Foundation. I understand what they put in a mere something, so many million to direct a program of so billion. Think about it. That's what they buy. It's buy of influence. And I wish I were president right now. This is the prime time to cut that all out. It would be beautiful if you have a catastrophe like we've got and need to cut something. And that's what they should be cutting. And yet, I don't see the Republicans up opposing that. I don't see anybody opposing that. It would be the first, because we've got threats to our children through Convention on Rights of the Child coming around the corner. It has nothing to do with education, of course, but, Convention on Rights of the Child. When they adopt these treaties and start taking away the rights of the parent, that's going to be the end of our country, and I submit, because families, I came to Iowa and talked against the same-sex marriages. I know the courts. I know judges. I know what they do and why they do it wrong. And I know I can explain it. And the same thing is going on today that went on back in 1857. They're not going by the words of the Constitution. And appointments to the Supreme Court are one of the most vital things a president does. If somebody dies, if one of the four dies, Alito, Roberts, Scalia, Thomas, die within the next, and I'm not saying this is ugly. If it's being recorded, please, long life. But I'm saying if one of them, we're a heartbeat away from losing our rights to keep and bear arms. Well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. I say the words because you have to know the words. Religious liberty. Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, abridging the freedom of speech and press, right of people peaceably to assemble and petition the government for redress of grievances. You got to know what religion was and is today, because they don't have a definition now. It was the duties you owe to the Creator and the manner of discharging it on the first table of the law. You've got to know the basis of these things, where they come from. Or when you get up there and the political pressure starts, and you can't do this because you're going to harm the Republicans, or you can't do it because the Democrats are going to get the job next time. I'm telling you, they got the job the last time because the Republicans didn't do what they had a chance to do. And it's all about leadership. We've got to have leadership, or the Republican Party is going the same way as the Democratic Party right now. And it's people like this. Why is same-sex marriage? One state has approved same-sex marriage by vote of the people. Not even California. It's always the judges. It's always the legislators, the governors. And they'll come in here and say, well, I'm for traditional marriage, but I would say, I'm for civil unions. It's double talk. It's like, how many votes have I got in this room? How can I say the most to get the most votes? Well, I'm not like that. I speak the truth. And I'm grounded not only in my faith, but I'm grounded in this document right here. Toward the preservation of your government and the permanency of your present happy state, it is requisite not only that you steadily discountenance irregular oppositions to its acknowledged authority, but that you resist with care the spirit of innovation upon its principles, however spacious the pretext, Washington said in his farewell address. And we don't realize what's going on. In our court system, Lena Kagan was asked where our rights come from, and she didn't know. If you don't know where your rights come from, and you got a Supreme Court justice up there supposedly to interpret the First Amendment, then we're in trouble. Because we're going to lose not only our rights, but a right to keep and bear arms. As the president of the Foundation for Moral Law, I work on those kind of things. We filed briefs in Heller versus Washington, D.C., and McDonald versus Chicago. But it's a very thin line between having those rights taken. I'm sorry, go on. Next question. Or was that answered?
You did.
Hey, Judge, I got a question. Based on what you've just said, and looking around this room, I would assume, and I don't think I'd be far off by saying that everybody in this room would vote for you.
Well, thank you.
I think I think that you say the things that we say, you believe the things that we believe, but we are a remnant. We are maybe, 10, 20% of the American voters? How are you going to get the other 31%?
talk about the issues like they want you to. And I do believe we need to return jobs, we need to return, all the issues he's talked about are true issues that we need to address in this country. We're not only destroying our morality on our base, we're destroying the very lifeblood. But we've got to have the perspective to know what the world's doing around us. We've got to have a perspective of the Constitution. I'm not answering your question yet, I will in a minute. But we got to know why Obama bombing Libya. Every Republican ought to be out there raising Cain, because it's such an egregious thing to violate when Congress is supposed to declare war, except in case of emergency, which he can act under the War Powers Clause. He's trying to act under the War Powers Clause without any emergency, and nobody's even going to call his hand on it. Nobody called Linda Kagan's hand when she don't know where rights come from. How am I going to get the message out? We're going to talk about the truth about our country, the truth about our faith, the truth about the Constitution, the truth about jobs, the truth about the economy. We have sold our children into debt with 14.26 million trillion, can't even say it, trillion dollars. And I understand that the people out there don't even know what $1 trillion is. They don't have understanding $1 billion is $31,500 or $31.5 million a year. It would take 32 years to reach $1 billion. You know how long it'd take to reach $1 trillion?
Yeah, 32,000 years.
We hadn't got 32,000. And that's the problem. We've got to start right now eliminating these useless federal programs, stopping wasteful government spending, and really, there's going to be a lot of Congress, I think, going to help on this in the next term. I really do. I believe there's going to be, they need a leader that will back them with understanding. How am I going to get that message? I don't know. We're going to work on getting the right message. We're going to work just to be there, because I think people are tired of politicians that say one thing and do another. I think they're looking for somebody that, for whatever thing, whether it's the Ten Commandments or whether it's whatever, they'll do what they say they'll do. They're real. And I think that's what we need. Yes, sir.
I want to make sure I heard you correctly. I think when you started, you said Ronald Reagan said he'd get rid of the NEA. Wasn't it the Department of Education that he said he'd get rid of, not the NEA?
I'm sorry. I did say NEA. It is Department of Education. You're right.
I
But,
vote for getting
hey,
rid of both.
He
Well,
did.
that's get rid of it.
He did.
It's highly infested, so.
But he didn't. He
No,
didn't.
Right.
No, he didn't.
He didn't get rid of the department. I said NEA.
Well, we're gonna be in favor of that, our organization. They'll be fine with us. but-
Okay, if you want me to keep the NEA. No, I'm just kidding. He did say Department of Education.
Now, what do you think of a national right to work law?
National right to work. Explain a little bit.
Actually, Iowa is a hybrid right to work state, because we also have monopoly bargaining in the state, and yet we call ourselves a right to work state.
I think right to work, you mean without public
That's where
bargaining?
you're not compelled to join a union. You're free to work
Of
wherever you want to
course.
work without being. And
Yeah.
some of the other candidates will say it's a states' rights issue.
Oh,
A
okay.
national right to work thinks there should be a national right to work law.
You have to understand, he's from the south. It's like air down there, the right to work. They didn't know that there was any other.
Right.
Well, actually, Missouri, your neighbor, is not a right to work state, so.
Right.
uh,
My
just
neighbor?
you-
Our neighbor.
Oh, your neighbor.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah, you're right. You would support that, was my question. If there was a national right to work bill, you would support that, is that right?
I'd have no objection to that. I don't see why, I would have no objection to that.
Taft-Hartley gave us every state the right to determine whether they were or not. 14B, I think,
Yeah.
Taft-Hartley did that. But we have currently 28 states that are still compulsory union states.
Well, I object to compulsory union, the national right to work, I would support.
Good.
I mean, don't get me wrong, let me clarify the thing with unions. I've always tried to look deep into that, and I know the Republican philosophy right now generally is that unions are all bad. Well, there was a time, my grandfather worked in the coal mines in Pennsylvania, and I never failed just to speak up. they stopped some bad things, and they got, they've stopped some bad things. My son right now, is working, the only way he could get a job is to join the union, which is hard, because they don't support me at all. And he's taking a lot, believe me, he's working iron workers union. But there's some things good, but there's a lot of things bad. Public workers union, I really don't think public workers should have unions, and that's the way I think, because I've seen all the NEAs and the teachers union and what they've done in Alabama, and they're cutting them out, and I'm all for that, stopping that. And but I think that nobody ever should be forced. What was this thing Obama did with the card check?
Card check.
It's egregious. Anytime you force people to do something, that's terrible. In fact, we've lost a lot of our manufacturing jobs because of unions and because of things like card check. The Free Trade Association agreements like NAFTA, GAFTA, and believe it or not, there's left SAFTA. There's one with the Arab League, and all these things that have allowed industry to go elsewhere because they didn't have to abide by the same rules that we've got here, part of which is unionization. And I think that right to work bill, I would support that. Yes.
This is more of a philosophical question than an issue question. Within conservative ranks, there are some who would be more incrementalistic, and there are some who would be more purist. And both sides on their face seem to be able to make compelling arguments for why it's better to take a little bit at a time, take what you can get now. And both sides seem on their face to have legitimate arguments for why the other way is, wrong. We've got that going on in Iowa in spades right now, from what I understand.
In what?
In spades. It's going on like crazy.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it is.
And so
You're talking about the right to life.
well, there's that. There's
What?
some gun stuff going on that way, from what I understand, and it kind of that philosophical tension rears its head in a bunch of different issues.
It does.
Tell me about where you're at and how you view all that.
I've never thought of being labeled either incrementalist or strictly ideological. But I guess if I were labeled, if you want to label me, don't label me an incrementalist. I believe incrementalism can take on different meanings in different situations. Let's take a situation and talk about it, okay? And this is a hard one. This is a hard one I've faced lately, so I probably shouldn't even bring it up. It's about life. Life. When does life begin? Do we pass a bill that says we just, and I got in the argument with this with the conservative, and let me say before I say any of this, that's the problem with it's not the problem with the debate, but so many times people will look at you and say, if you don't believe exactly like I do, I'm not going to support you. I'm going to support Barack Obama. I'm thinking, wow. I go into these groups that they'll pick, but I believe, for example, that we were arguing or talking about the heartbeat bill. Then there's the 20-week bill. And then there's the 30-week bill. And the 40-week bill. And whatever bills they got about life. Or there's conception. Life was an immediate gift of God, a right inherent in nature in every individual. It begins in contemplation of law as soon as the infant stirs in its mother's womb. That was the definition given by Sir William Blackstone in the Commentaries on the Laws of England, from which we get our law. They knew life began in the womb. At the kick, called quickening. So you start there when it kicks, or when its heart beats, or with more technological machinery and instruments we got, when it's conceived. I go back to conception. And I didn't want to join a bill for a Christian lady the other day that said it began with the heartbeat. I understand where they're going. If we can just save some of these children, then that's better than condemning them all. And I understand that argument. I appreciate it. I don't hold it against it. I've had it with some of my own clerks and lawyers. But I would go back to conception. And what's conception? I realize there's some argument about what's conception. And I believe that's fertilization and attachment to the mother's womb, which begins within 4 or 5 days of fertilization. Why not fertilization? If you said fertilization in the mother's womb, I have no objection to that. I know deeply about this discussion because I got into it deeply. Incrementalism in a lot of things. I mean, there's incrementalism. You can take the other side of incrementalism. They want to just limit guns just a little bit, you know. We wrote briefs, and as I said, McDonald and Heller versus Washington D.C. So I guess I'm purist, or what's the other side?
I mean, I'm with you. I don't wanna make it, I don't wanna claim one or the other.
I don't want
I
to claim
understand,
the one,
right.
but when it comes to inalienable right to life, it comes to religious liberty,
Yeah.
let's take religious liberty. I never thought of this. Let's just say the government can restrict you a little bit. Well, that's basically what they're doing.
1954.
You know, most of our society are they're incrementalists against us. We're not purists. They've already restricted the acknowledgement of God. They've already stopped it on public squares. In fact, the Supreme Court plays the biggest game of hypocrisy in the world. They opened their session with God Save the United States Dishonorable Court, which they said was a prayer. Then they denied it to school children. And when they did that in 1962, William O. Douglas wrote to Hugo Black and said, I have problems with this. If we do this, how can we open our sessions with prayer? Well, he went on and voted for the bill, and that's what they still do. But it's an incrementalism taking away the knowledge of God, slowly but surely, step by step. And, you know, they win by that. And we lose by recognizing that anytime they interfere with our right to acknowledge God, anytime they interfere with the right to acknowledge God, they're taking away a value right, and we become slaves. And they become tyrants. And that was the definition given by James Madison in Moral Monstrance when he said the preservation of a free government requires not merely that the metes and bounds which separate each department of power may be invariably maintained, but more especially that neither of them be suffered to overleap the great barrier which defends the rights of the people. The rulers who are guilty of such an encroachment exceed the commission from which they derive their authority and are tyrants. The people who submit to it are governed by laws made neither by themselves nor by no authority derived from them, and are slaves. We are slaves today because they have breached that great barrier which defends our rights. The fact that there's a God, we can worship Him, and He gives us our rights. Moral Monstrance stands for that. Yes, sir.
Maybe to put a finer point on this, I don't think the question is incrementalism losing our rights, but in reclaiming. So,
Yeah.
so you're,
Well,
you're
it's
president.
mostly in reclaiming rights, but I'm saying.
But I think you're president. You're presented with the bill. We all agree. I think in this room, probably life begins at conception. But Congress passes a bill that says, well, we're going to ban abortions after 30 weeks, 24.
Okay,
20
what would
weeks.
I do?
Do you sign that bill? Or gun rights? I'm a constitutional carry guy, but you know, if there's a bill that's presented to you that's been passed that says, you know, they have to have a reasonable restriction, or
And that's a good question.
I think that's the debate. That's the
why
debate.
the-
I wasn't
referring to-
asking issue questions, I was asking philosophical
No,
questions.
I'm
You
not
can get
asking,
into the
I'm not
issues
asking
if
those
you'd like.
bills, I'm saying, whatever it is,
That was my
there's a
question.
bill,
Yeah.
I don't care what the issue, issue X. It falls short of what you believe the standard should be. Do you sign that
Well, it
bill,
depends.
or do you say, send me the whole thing, or send me nothing? That's the
Well, I
incremental
mean,
ballot.
I think it depends. I know this is typical politician.
Attorney.
It really depends. No, it depends on what we're talking about. If it's an unalienable right, you know what unalienable means? It means you can't take it, you can't even give it up. Life is unalienable. Why? Because they can't take it from us unless the exceptional law, you know, you forfeit it because of taking the life of another. And you can't even give it up by suicide. And so it depends if it's an unalienable right, like right to life. And if I had a problem and I thought that Roe versus Wade should be reversed, that's the first thing. That should be the federal government to protect life. So if they send a bill like that, that would be a hard one, because I've met a lot of people that would say, well, you don't sign something like that, then you're condemning everybody over 20 weeks. And if you do sign something like that, then you're saying they can't take it up to 20 weeks. And I'd have problems. if I couldn't sign it, probably just wouldn't do anything.
We're just, you'll encounter that
But
with
I
your
mean,
campaign in Iowa.
yeah.
This is an issue going on in Iowa.
Well, I know it's going on in Iowa, and I just have to take the bill, whatever bill it was, and look at it, I guess.
I was trying to stay out of the fray. You went into the fray. I'm kidding, I'm kidding, I'm kidding.
But there is so much going wrong with our country, and what's going on up there, it just is really upsets me and upsets most people. And I think the difference between me and somebody else, I really do, is I do something about it.
So, follow-up to his follow-up is, and this is interesting, I've never heard this before, and it's compelling, I need to think about it, but you would handle an inalienable right issue differently than you'd handle just, some other issue. And so, for instance, if, you
Well,
brought
sure.
up guns and life, you'd handle guns and life differently. Gun rights and
I'm hard on gun rights too. I
that's good, that's good.
You know, if they want to put the stamp on ammunition, that's not incrementalism. That's total obliteration of your right to keep and bear arms, and that's what they're trying. And I submit that's what's going to happen if they ever do get it. While we're worried about keeping the guns, I've got lots of guns. But if they take away all the ammunition you got, you might as well just use that as a club and go back to sticks. Because that's basically what they're doing. I don't think they have a right to ban ammunition. And like guns, ammunition never killed anybody unless, somebody set it off or maybe by accident or something. But
We're not trying to trap you in an answer. We're just trying to set you for the landscape that's out there. This
I
is
need
a
to
raging debate
think,
within
but I
our
mean,
party right now.
really, we got so many people going to Washington. They get up there, they don't understand the Constitution, so they don't impeach justices who rule by foreign law. I mean, the egregious nature of Lawrence v. Kennedy that started all this mess in 2003 occurred because of the laws of France, Germany, and the United Kingdom. And that's what they said in their opinion. And yet, in 1986, in Bowers versus Hardwick, they said there's no such right to commit sodomy under the Constitution. I mean, the problem with Republicans, they won't go and overturn long-established precedent. But the Democrats, they don't care. If it was done yesterday, McDonald versus Chicago, tomorrow they get one vote, there'll be a case up there. There'll be a case up there. And they don't matter, and I've not heard this argued too much. This right to same-sex marriage, and they cite Lawrence v. Kennedy, and there's a statement in Kennedy, which I disagree with the whole import of Lawrence v. Kennedy, that at least the judge said, we're not saying this is public, they can take the public right, this is a right of privacy. And now all of a sudden you see how it's an incrementalism. But when justices rule by their own feelings and predilections, then they become a law unto themselves. When a strict interpretation of the Constitution, according to the fixed rules which govern the interpretation of laws, is abandoned, and the theoretical opinions of individuals are allowed to control its meaning, we have no longer a Constitution. We're under a government of individual men who for the time being have the power to declare what the Constitution is according to their own views of what they think it ought to mean. Dred Scott, 1857. They were doing the same thing then, they're doing today. And it's not a changing philosophy. It's not going by law. And before y'all say, well, I could never get through to somebody because I'm offering all these complicated quotes from history, I do that for y'all because you got to understand it's what here rules what you do. It's not what you say. It's what you understand. And if you understand the truth and you're sworn to uphold it, then you got to do it. It's a restriction on power. It's tempting to go bomb Libya. Nobody likes Gaddafi. I don't like Gaddafi. But the UN, it's bothers me.
That was my question. I'd like to see, I have a couple questions, what your foreign policy would be
Okay.
and the reasoning for it. And two, when we get a good, strong conservative candidate in there, the media really likes to take them apart. We were just talking about Tina Fey doing in Sarah Palin's career. What do you think will be your reception in the media? What will be your most difficult? Do you think it'll be polarizing?
Well, I be polarizing? How dare you?
No problem.
How are you gonna overcome the polarization?
That's a better question.
How will I overcome polarization? But being humble, speaking the truth, and don't care what the media says, because I ain't worried about the next 4 years. That's the problem in politics. It's about power, not principle. And if you become so wrapped up in the power of, oh, I'm president, if I could just get 4 more years, then what? Then you get out of the job. And you lose all viability in the first 4 years. The problem with politics is simple. It's about power. I'm sorry, I'd probably be polarizing because the issues are polarizing. Obama's not polarizing. That's the problem. We're Christians standing up when every May he puts out from the White House the National Declaration of June being the national day or national month to celebrate gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender pride. And he says they're the best qualities of these people exhibit the best qualities of servants in civil government. They're not qualified. Where's the polarization? Where are the churches standing up? And thankfully, I'm not talking to Iowa. I got to admit, that's the best thing I've seen occur because I don't know any other state which has the Missouri plan. Ours doesn't have it. We just vote them out of office. Because they know that, they don't do that. You have the Missouri plan which says you got to vote for retention. I.e., it doesn't matter if you were a perfect judge. It's their right to say no. But they've turned that around. And you go and throw out their DOMA law, throw out their past precedents that says in your own Iowa laws, Supreme Court law said marriage between one man, one woman for life. They throw that out, then they take this equal protection provision and twist it to mean something it doesn't mean and say, now, issue same-sex marriage. And they get upset when you vote them out of office and the press says you did something wrong. That's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. They're ruling by not the law, but their feelings.
Tom, did you have anything you wanted to ask?
No, I
Greg?
mean, he's
know
singing
you
my
have
song
the-
right
okay,
now,
good.
so, I mean, that's exactly the thing we had issue with that whole decision, not only the fact that they made it, but how they found it, you know, I mean, they went looking for it, you know, so,
Well, they have to. Since 1965 in Griswold versus Connecticut, it always begins Supreme Court. They started this right of privacy found by a penumbra formed by emanations of the
Yeah.
first, third, fifth, and ninth amendments. I mean,
yeah.
a penumbra, shadow outside of a shadow of a planet called emanations. It's crazy. So, but I can't think of a group more in line with what I stand for. Yes, sir.
I just wanted to follow up on Tamara's question regarding foreign policy.
Oh, yeah, foreign policy. You asked.
Specifically, we know where you're at with Libya. What's your position on U.S. policy toward Afghanistan? If we have a president more in 2012, or actually 2013, after you sworn in, what would your commitment to that, the war on terror, be? What would that look like?
War on terror is, I mean, that's a word that you can just apply to anything in
Okay.
it. How can we pretend to defend Afghanistan's borders and can't even protect our own? I mean, that's basically what we're doing is saying, and after we've been over there and over 3,000, I don't know what the exact count is, 3,000 something soldiers have been killed, they're protesting. And Hamil Karzai is rousing his people because of what this guy did down in Florida with burning of the Iran. The problem is we shouldn't be the police power of the world. And if I were president, I'd say, okay, I'm getting out. I know they also have orderly withdrawal, but you got to have a withdrawal. I mean, you just can't say tomorrow we're all gone. We would be getting out, or if the Congress wanted to declare war, then I'd go in there and we would be at war. And if we're at war, it'd get it done. And it would be over. I'd find what they wanted. If they wanted to declare war, under the Constitution, if the United States Congress declared war on England. That's a bad example, isn't it? I better not use these examples. The examples get me in trouble. If they declared war on somebody, Libya, let's use Libya. Besides, they declared war on Libya. I'd go in there and get it done. That is the job of the commander-in-chief. And it wouldn't be nice. It would be done. And then I'd get out if the job was done and Congress recognized it. Right now, it's topsy-turvy. The president goes in there and starts something and says, I got to stay longer, and now I got ground troops, and even though some of the commanders are arguing for ground troops now, which they don't understand the Constitution, it is up to Congress to declare war, unless there's an immediate threat to our country. I just feel really badly for those kids over there that are keep risking their life. I know it's not the typical war, but kill a few thousand of them, then the people in America get the picture. But I mean, you got to go by the Constitution. That's all I'm saying. That's what I do. No matter how I felt. You know, that's the problem when we put feelings ahead of Constitution.
What would you do in the campaign about Obama's ability or inability to prove American citizenship?
I don't know what he did, but you go to my website, more2012.com, and it's also RoyMoore2012.com. It's still up.
It's
Or
RoyMoore.net.
RoyMoore.net. Well,
Or it got
I won't
changed again.
explain how that occurred, but I think Roy Moore 2012
It'll
is
take
still
you
up.
there. It'll
Dot
take you
com.
there, yeah.
It's still up. I've got my birth certificate posted. And immediately the liberals want to say, well, what do you think? What do you think about Obama? What's the matter what I think? If I were president and 10 million people out there thought I wasn't born here, I'd put my birth certificate up, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
I mean, let's come in. So why isn't it? And if it's 20 million people don't believe it, what if it's a whole country? What if some state wants to put a requirement up there that they produce their birth certificate, period? I wish they would. You know, that would certainly move the situation.
Yeah.
That would move the situation. My personal opinion, I'll keep to myself,
My
but you know what it
understanding
is.
is that what he's provided so far would not even get him a passport. It wouldn't qualify to get him a passport.
My child had to have a birth certificate for Little League. I had to have one to go to the Bahamas last year to talk to ministry. How he got through schools, and then says I just don't know. I don't understand it myself. But I want to thank y'all for listening to me, and I'm not pretending. These guys know me pretty well, but everything y'all stand for, I agree with. I won't go in just talking about things that people don't understand, get elected. I won't talk to y'all about it because it's what motivates you, what gives you the will to take a stand and to do what's right. And it also gives you a background so if somebody tries to approach you on the subject.
Well, many of us have organizations that would love to give you a forum, and even if we don't, I think I can speak for all of us that we're all here to be a resource
Okay.
for you and your campaign. So
We will be
Carrie
calling
knows
them.
that more than anybody in here. So just let us know what we can do. We're going to offer the same help to every other candidate too. We just want to make sure that between us, we can be the best we